Welcome to the Diversity Connector podcast, where we explore the rich tapestry of human experiences. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging, and together as we dive into conversations that bridge cultures, challenge stereotypes, and celebrate the unique perspectives each of us brings to the table. Each episode is a journey through stories and insights from a kaleidoscope of voices, each sharing their colorful narrative. Whether you're at home, on the go, or just anywhere in between, you're now part of a community that values understanding, inclusivity, and the beauty of diversity. So plug in your headphones, get comfortable, and let's connect through the power of our shared stories. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Diversity Connector podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Diversity Connector. This is Gertrude Mache here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And today I am graced with the presence of yet another fascinating woman. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, and share your story with us today.
Hello, my name is Jenny Kassan, and I'm based in California in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm so excited to be here to share my story. I am an unlikely entrepreneur, but I'm so grateful that I did fall into being an entrepreneur because I absolutely love it. I went to law school. I became a lawyer. And my first job out of law school was at a nonprofit organization. And I did all kinds of things there, whatever was needed to, we were working on community economic development in a low-income community. So I worked on a big real estate project. I worked on some streetscape improvements, improving the neighborhood, trying to bring safety and cleanliness to the neighborhood. And one of the things that I was in charge of was being a supporter for the small local businesses in the area. And so we had a commercial street, a bunch of retail shops, restaurants, things like that. Also some service businesses, and I would walk up and down the street and talk to the business owners. And this was a very international neighborhood. In fact, the street is called International Boulevard. So there were immigrants from all over the world who had businesses on this street. It still exists. If you come to Oakland, California, you should definitely visit this neighborhood. There's wonderful food and products from all over the world. And I learned that they faced a lot of challenges. They really were struggling to just keep their doors open, to deal with all the regulatory issues around being a business owner. And I just learned how hard it was to be a small business owner. My parents are not small business owners, although we do have small business in our history. I have some earlier relatives that had been entrepreneurs, immigrant entrepreneurs, but I hadn't really experienced firsthand in my immediate family what it was like to be a small business owner. So my eyes were really opened. And so I just started to try to figure out, why is this so difficult? Why are there so few resources for small businesses? And I realized that there is this whole issue of access to capital. So, some small businesses may not need outside funding, but many do, because it is very hard to have a successful business, sometimes without some kind of external funding, whether you're just getting started or maybe you're growing and you need to buy some new things to be able to grow your business and make it more successful. Oftentimes you're going to need some money to cover those upfront costs so that your business can be more successful and be more professional, and you can treat your workers well and make sure you're doing things correctly and you have a great accountant on board and great marketing and all of that. So I started to really look into the issue of access to capital for small business. And I realized that it's a crisis. I call it a crisis. I'm not the only one. Small businesses in the US, where I'm based, but I know it's true everywhere, really don't have good access to capital. Sometimes they're just not eligible at all for available sources of funding, or they may be eligible, but it may not be a good fit. So, for example, I had my own small business, but after leaving the nonprofit, I actually formed a law firm with a co-founder to help small businesses try to raise capital. And we ended up taking out a business loan, and that business loan required a personal guarantee. So me and my business partner were personally on the hook if the business didn't do well and we weren't able to pay the loan. So a lot of small business financing options have strings attached that are very, very onerous and difficult to deal with. So it's almost like better if you don't get the money than if you do, because the money comes with so many strings attached and so many risks for the business owner and their family. So, like I said, I left the nonprofit after 11 years and I had met this attorney who also was interested in this issue, and we co-founded a law firm to try to help small businesses raise money in the United States, and I believe in every other country in the US. Raising money from investors is a highly regulated activity. So you really do need a lawyer if you're going to do it correctly. So that's what we were focusing on. And he was really the leader. He was an older white man with really amazing, impressive credentials. And I was kind of more in the background. I felt very, like, oh, I don't know anything. I have so much to learn. And he was the more confident one, that he had experience in this area. So I learned a lot. I really studied the issue, and I started to have clients where I was helping them to raise money from investors using strategies that allowed them to determine what the terms of the investment would be. But, after a few years of doing this, my business partner, this older man, received an offer to go to a different job on the opposite coast, on the East Coast. And he said, "You can run this law firm. Don't worry. I have faith in you. You'll be fine. I'm leaving. I'll be available if you have any questions." So that's how I kind of got thrown into being an entrepreneur. And I was nervous at first, but I did realize pretty quickly that I absolutely loved being an entrepreneur. I had had some experience already at the law firm. I had started to grow my networking skills and my, marketing skills. So I ran the law firm, and that's how I got thrown into being an entrepreneur. And so we ended up developing a lot of tools and strategies to help small businesses raise money from investors. And basically, our theory was that if you go to the usual suspects for getting business funding, you're often going to face a lot of challenges. And when I say the usual suspects, what I mean is banks, uh, other kinds of small business lenders, even nonprofit lenders that are supposed to be, focusing on helping small businesses, other types of investors like investment funds, venture capital funds. Those sources of funding, much more often than not, are not going to be a good fit for most small businesses. And yet, a lot of people don't know that there's any alternative. So they might go after those types of funds, realize that either they're not eligible or they don't want the money because there's so many strings attached. And so they kind of give up and they think, I can't raise any money. But what we realized is that there's lots and lots of sources of money that many businesses don't even think about. And what I call those sources of funding is what we call the 100%, the non-usual suspects, the regular folks who actually might have some money that they might want to invest in your business. And a lot of people just don't even think of that source of funding. But collectively, at least in the US, there are tens of trillions of dollars that are controlled by regular folks, not necessarily super wealthy, but collectively it's tens of trillions of dollars. And most of that money is invested in the public markets, on the stock exchange, on Wall Street, in mutual funds and things like that. And many, many people are interested in understanding alternatives to investing on the public markets. And that's because for those of us who have money invested, so let's say, for example, you have in the US, the way we deal with retirement is you put your own money into a retirement account, it gets a tax advantage, and those retirement accounts, 99.9% of that money is going to be invested in these public companies. Public companies they're the biggest companies on earth. And oftentimes those companies aren't necessarily doing the best things for our world. And a lot of people don't love the idea of having all their money invested in those companies. And it's not like it's super safe and secure because, the stock market can go up and down. I mean, we have experienced times where the stock market has gone way down and we never know what's going to happen in the future. So the idea that you could take some of your investment dollars and invest it outside of the public markets into a small business is something that a lot of people are very interested in. And yes, of course, small business investing can be risky. But, I often question the idea that it's super risky because if you know the small business, if you're a customer of the small business, you might know a lot more about that business than you know about your typical public company that you may be investing in on Wall Street. So, and of course, one of the main reasons small business investing can be risky is that most small businesses lack access to capital. So if they have sufficient access to capital, it really reduces the risk, especially if the investment is designed in a way to be more patient, more customized to that particular business's situation. So that's what I've been working on for the last 17 years is helping small businesses design customized strategies for raising funding from their customers, people in their community, people that have values alignment with what they're doing with their business. So, I work with businesses that oftentimes not only are making money, but also are making a positive impact in the world. And so many businesses do, by creating jobs, by bringing more vibrancy or important services to their community, by giving back to local charities. And so a lot of people really want that opportunity to invest in those types of businesses. So that's what I've been doing now for a while. And, I was with that business partner for a while. We were together for 9 years. He came back from the East Coast. And suddenly we weren't getting along as well as we had been. And I think that's because I had grown so much that I started to kind of be pushed back a little bit on, I didn't just always agree with everything he wanted to do. So we started to see things a little bit differently. So back in 2015, about 8 years ago, I went ahead and left that partnership and started my own law firm. And that was huge because, like I said, I never thought I would be, owning my own business, running my own business, having employees, doing all the sales and marketing. But I'm really grateful that I did it because it's been a very empowering thing for me. And I've also raised money myself. So I've seen a lot of small business owners that were my clients successfully raise money in the way that we teach. And so I've done it now myself. I've actually done it 5 times and I've raised several $1,000,000 for multiple different businesses. The first time I raised money, it was for that law firm that I was with the partner with. I raised money for a small investment fund. I raised money for an investment crowdfunding platform, and I'm currently raising money for an ecosystem building project I'm working on in Baltimore, Maryland. We've bought a building, and the idea is that that building will be the headquarters for a place-based initiative where we will support entrepreneurs with accessing capital from the community. And so when we look, Baltimore, Maryland is like a medium-sized business in the US, I mean, medium-sized city in the US. But if you look at the area collectively, there are billions and billions of dollars invested by local residents of the Baltimore metro area. And our goal is to move 1 to 3% of that money into small local businesses, which would be a game changer. Even though it's such a small percentage of the total, collectively, it would be billions of dollars. And that would be such a game changer for the small local businesses in Baltimore. And then hopefully, if we're successful in Baltimore, we will bring it to other communities throughout the United States. And one of the tools we use is something called investment crowdfunding. So this is where we get into some legal issues, but in the US, it became legal in 2016 to advertise an investment opportunity in a small business, and anyone can invest. I actually was involved in getting that law to go into effect. And luckily enough for us, it happened. And so it is now legal for anyone in the US to invest in a small business. That business does have to jump through some hoops, but that's the tool that we're trying to use to make it possible for everyone to invest a small portion of their investment portfolio into a business that they love.
What a wonderful story, Jenny. You have come a long way in developing yourself, developing your business, and now you're empowering so many other people. So you are really focused on mission-driven enterprises and value-aligned investing. Why is that?
Well, I mean, I feel that it's very important that everyone do their part to try to make a positive impact on the world. There's so many challenges in our world right now, and everyone needs to do their part. And I find that most people I meet, and I will say especially women, really love having a positive impact. Sometimes it's a non-negotiable for them. Like they won't even consider doing an activity that doesn't have some positive impact. And
Yes.
so I absolutely love working with businesses that have that as part of their goal. Obviously, we also want to make sure they're making money as well. But
Mhm.
this whole concept of social enterprise is something that started to become a popular topic maybe about, when I was graduating from law school. I remember people were starting to talk about this term, social enterprise, back in the mid 90s. And just the idea that you don't have to be a charity or a nonprofit to make a positive impact in the world. Charities and
Yes.
nonprofits are very important, but businesses can also make a positive impact. So we need to, and they need to be, because they are such a big force in our world. So it's very,
Wow.
very important to me to work with business owners that have that perspective.
So, what are some of the biggest challenges that mission-driven enterprises face when attempting to raise capital? And how do you advise them to overcome these hurdles?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of mission-driven businesses, and really honestly, a lot of businesses in general, are not a fit for the most well-known sources of capital.
Mm.
So, and the most well-known sources of capital are banks and lenders on the one hand, and then there's investment funds like venture capital, for example. And venture capital and also private equity and other types of investment funds, they are obligated, really, in most cases, they are promising to their investors, because they're not investing their own money, they're investing other people's money. And they're making a promise to their investors: we are going to maximize your financial return. And that is the number one goal. If there's some positive social impact, great, but that is not that would have to be sacrificed if it got in the way of maximizing the financial return. So anyone who is concerned that by maximizing financial returns you might compromise on other things, because if there is a certain point at which the returns are so high that it really does require you to compromise on other things. And that's why we've seen so many companies that are invested in by venture capital start to compromise on their values, like start to give their customers information or sell their customers information, no privacy, or, get rid of their commitment. Like I remember when Ben and Jerry's went public, Ben and Jerry's ice cream, they got rid of their commitment to have inner city scoop shops that they had where they would sell ice cream in inner city neighborhoods as a way to create jobs. They got rid of
Right.
so oftentimes if it's really important to you to have a positive impact and you don't want to be forced to put financial returns, really high financial returns ahead of everything else, you have to be very careful where you get your money from.
That's interesting. So, can you share a memorable story or an experience from your career that had a profound impact on your approach to business?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. But one of the earliest experiences I had that just gave me a lot of faith in what's possible. So one of my very first clients when I was starting to help small businesses raise money, it was someone who really his vision, his dream was to start a grocery store in a low income neighborhood in Oakland, California. And he was a very impressive person. He had a master's degree in business. He was a very good public speaker. And so he spent a year trying to raise money to build this grocery store by going to a lot of pitch competitions, talking to a lot of usual suspect funders. And he would often win the pitch competitions because he was such a good speaker. He had such an inspiring vision, but he didn't raise a dime for a whole year. And so he came to me and we talked about, well, why don't you try raising money from the non-usual suspects, from regular folks? And he said, okay, I'll give it a try. So we set up his investment offering. And in his case, he offered an equity interest in his business. So like an ownership interest in his business that would pay a dividend. And a dividend is a share of the profits. And he couldn't offer much because this was a grocery store. They don't have big margins. They're not extremely profitable. So what he offered to investors was an annual dividend of 3%, meaning you would get 3% of your money every year. So it's almost like investing in a bank account with a 3% interest rate, but much riskier because this was a startup grocery store in a low income neighborhood. And so I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if he'll be able to do this. We can definitely get him set up on the legal side, but will people really invest in something that's so risky and really doesn't offer a very high return? Amazingly enough, he ended up raising almost $2 million. And I forget how, he had hundreds of investors. The minimum investment amount was $1,000. And he also offered that for people who couldn't afford $1,000, you could also pre-purchase a gift card for the business. So this allowed him to leverage other funding, and he was able to open the business.
Oh, how fascinating. That's very, very creative. Very creative. Now, you wrote a book called Raise Capital on Your Own Terms: How to Fund Your Business Without Selling Your Soul. Sounds very intriguing. What inspired you to write that?
Yeah. So by the time I wrote that book, I had been helping people to raise money using these creative strategies for, gosh, it had been about 10 years or so. And so I just realized that I actually had a formula. And, I had kind of figured that out before I wrote the book, that we took people through a 6-step process to design their strategy. And so I decided to put it in a book because I wanted more people to have access to this approach to fundraising, because I kept finding, even though I had been doing it for 10 years, everywhere I went, when I talked about our approach, a lot of people were surprised. They had never heard of such an approach. They didn't know that it could actually work. So I thought it would be a great idea to really get into some details, so that if you read the book, and it is, very focused on a US audience because it has a bunch of legal stuff in there, but the non-legal part I think could apply in any place. Just how do you design a fundraising strategy where you can stay in control of your business? You can access the right kinds of funders for you, and do it on your own terms.
Okay. So, given the increasing focus on ESG in the investment world, how can mission-driven enterprises leverage this trend?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a growing interest among investors of all kinds to have the money that they invest be invested in a way that is consistent with their values. I mean, this has been going on for a long time. Studies have shown for a long time that the majority of investors would prefer to have their money invested in a way that is having a positive impact in the world. But the numbers are growing. And if you look at younger people, it's a huge percentage. I wish I knew the exact percentage, but it's like the vast majority of young people really care about where their money is invested and wanting to make sure it's consistent with the world they want to see in the future. And I think that's so great because, a lot of people are a little bit sort of like, they put their head in the sand when it comes to how their money is invested. They might have, money from a retirement account, or just some money that they've gotten somehow and they've kind of invested it somewhere. And maybe they have like a robo advisor or someone who's managing their money for them, and they rarely really look at it, and they don't even really know how their money is invested. But more and more people are wanting to be a lot more involved and empowered around how their money is invested, because the size of our our global financial system is huge. Our global financial system, in terms of the dollar flows, is more than 10 times bigger than the real economy. So, like goods and services. So, it's huge. It has a huge impact on everything about our world. So, for a while, a lot of people were talking about how you shop, like you should shop with socially responsible businesses, but how you invest, I would argue, is even more important. And I think more and more people are becoming aware of that. So if your business is about, having a positive impact, I think that will help you attract investors.
That's fantastic. So, what are the key elements that you believe every pitch or proposal to value aligned investors should contain?
Yeah, I mean, I love to say that it's going to really vary. The last thing want people to feel like is that they have to fit themselves into some kind of a cookie cutter model. If you Google like pitch deck, you're going to find like, these are the 10 slides that you have to have. And yes, some of those slides have some good things in them, but I do think that everyone should be really authentic to themselves and what they feel comfortable with, what their values are, what they feel like is best to emphasize. So I don't think there's really any rules, but on the other hand, any investor, unless it's an investor that is just so values driven that they don't really care if they make their money back or not, which there are some investors who feel that way, but most investors are going to want to see, like, what is the pathway, how I'm going to make money, and they may not want like a huge return, but they want to see like, okay, what's the plan? How is your business going to get to the point where it's making enough money where you can fulfill your, whatever your promises are or your projections are with how your investors are going to get paid. So having some good financial projections, and I know a lot of people feel uncomfortable with financial projections because it takes a lot of guessing. We just don't know the future. But if you
Yes.
can develop some financial projections that you feel decent about, and you can show how your business will be able to pay your investors in the way that you're planning to pay them, I think that is very important.
That's awesome. So, are there any particular sectors or industries where you see a growing trend in mission driven enterprises and value aligned investing?
Um, it's a good question. I mean, I feel like there's so many industries where it's becoming more of something that people are conscious of, is how that industry can positively contribute. I know that, for example, tomorrow I'm speaking at an event about maternal health. Um, so issues that are really key to the basic well-being of underrepresented people um, are areas where I think there are some mission-driven investors that are really looking at how can we invest in these kinds of businesses. Um, and then, of course, that requires some creative thinking, because sometimes these businesses are not going to be as incredibly profitable as like a Google or a Facebook, but they can make money while also making a really positive impact on something as basic as maternal health. So I think almost every area can be ripe for investing and for supporting positive outcomes in the world. Other areas I would say are anything that promotes democracy, democratic engagement, like journalism projects and things like that, civic engagement. Also, anything related to climate change, because that's an
A big
existential
one.
threat. Yeah. So these are things that we need to put emphasis on, and that some investors are trying to find ways that they can invest in these existential needs that we have as a planet, as a
I love
species.
that. Now, I know that we always sometimes look back at our younger selves when we were starting on our entrepreneurial journeys. If I could take you back to the younger you when you were starting out on this mission, what three nuggets of wisdom would you have wanted somebody to tell you before you started?
Mm, yeah, well, it's hard to tell someone this when they're just starting out, but to try to really have courage and not be afraid to speak up when you see something that you feel like it it doesn't seem quite right. Um, I've found over the year I've gained courage over the years to speak my mind when I see something that I feel isn't right. But oftentimes it took someone else saying it first for me to have the courage to say it. Like, "Oh my gosh, does anyone else think this?" So yeah, that would be one thing, is try to have the courage of your convictions and speak up. And related to that is, don't try to make everyone like you, because when you do speak up, you will probably piss off some people. Some people won't like what you have to say, but I think it's actually better to be really upfront about your point of view, because the people who need to hear your point of view and will feel so excited to hear you saying what you have to say, because they don't feel empowered enough to say it themselves, it's so wonderful for them, and they will become so loyal to you and support you in so many ways, as opposed to what if you have just a very generic point of view where it's like, oh, you're saying the same thing everyone else is saying.
Yes.
So be comfortable making a splash, having not everyone like you.
I love that. I love it. So let's teleport you now into the future with a little time experiment. I'm going to transport you to meet the 90-year-old you. If I could take you into the future and you are sitting on your porch, in your rocking chair, surrounded by your children, your grandchildren, your great grandchildren, if I could teleport you there now to have a conversation with this wise woman, what would you say to her based on how you're living your life right now?
Mm, what would I say to the 90-year-old version of me? Um, Thank you for being open to growth opportunities and facing fears and not letting them stop you. Being willing to get things wrong or be embarrassed, but still keep moving forward and not let it take you down. And thank you for your lifelong commitment to social justice.
The other reason why I like to ask this question is that, especially for women, we don't realize that the wise woman is already in us. She's already guiding us. That's why we're driven to do the things that we do. I like to play with the energy of who I'm becoming. And when I get stuck, sometimes I go into my prayers, my meditation, and I ask her, what is the next step? And
Yeah.
I tune into those answers that come from within. So, Jenny, thank you so much for coming online today and sharing your story, inspiring us with these ideas on how we can move forward in our lives as entrepreneurs. Do you have any parting thoughts, advice for our listeners in terms of how they can build their value aligned businesses and find those investors?
Yes. I mean, I just want to really emphasize that it not to be afraid to think about getting investors for your business. I find that most women entrepreneurs, they never even consider it. They feel like they have to just what we call bootstrap, which is like doing everything on your own, and that can be really hard and it can really almost contain the seeds of destruction of your business. If you try to wear every single hat in your business, you can't afford to hire a professional accountant or website designer. It can really be so hard on you, hard on your family, that it makes it hard to even have a successful business. So, and of course, not everyone has the money to invest up front in those things. So, don't count yourself out from raising money from investors. Like I said, I've done it 5 times. The first time I did it, I was terrified, but over time I've gotten more and more comfortable with it. The amounts of money that I'm raising now, I never could have imagined when I first got started. So it's a great skill to develop and start thinking about it and learn what it takes in your particular country to do it legally. Many countries do have crowdfunding laws that make it possible for you to raise money from anybody. You don't have to just go after those investors that are wanting to extract the super high returns and requiring you to make all kinds of personal sacrifices for them to make the highest possible return.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jenny, and thank you to everybody who tuned in today. The Diversity Connector is bringing professionals, entrepreneurs onto the platform to share these ideas so you can build a successful business. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview another amazing guest. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world. And Jenny, thanks again for the interview. Bye for now, everybody. That's a wrap, everybody, on today's episode of the Diversity Connector podcast. Thank you for tuning in and being part of our vibrant and global conversation. I'm your host, Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a tapestry of diverse perspectives. Remember, every story you've heard today is a thread in the larger fabric of our shared humanity. So, as you step back into your world, carry these stories with you and let them inspire you to embrace and celebrate the rich diversity around us. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these inspiring stories with more listeners. Do follow us on social media by looking for the Diversity Connector podcast for more updates. Until then, keep connecting, keep listening, and keep celebrating the beauty of diversity. This is the Diversity Connector podcast signing off. Stay curious, stay open, and definitely stay